Hey there, Sam with you here, midday, Monday, January 15th. I had some members interested in UBIQ. To tell you the truth, I don't even know how you pronounce it. UBIQ. Anyway, it's I'm over here on CoinGecko. UBIQ, 38 on the scale here. A bit of a red flag, but it's we can take a look at it, right? So a member wants to look at it. We'll see if there's anything there. So it's been around for a while, and it's gone through, I guess, some name changes and some evolution here. It's been around over 3 years. So kind of interesting here, But this, for a coin that's been around that long, this is, maybe it's just getting its legs here. Eventually, finally, now with after this is the third name change. Market cap 200 million. Decent here. Wouldn't be the first place I'd look if I saw that score, but for, if you're interested in it for whatever reason, let's see if we can trade it. It's all traded on against Bitcoin and 92.7% on Bittrex, so that's where we'll look at it. So here it is on Bittrex. This is a daily chart, so you can see, up we go, down we go. We see that in crypto all the time. So we're back down here now. We've got a pivot that we can isolate here and wick off and say, okay, well maybe we've got a good pivot and maybe we're starting something new here. So when I look at that, so the first thing I want to do is say, well, how technical is there? Algo tracks in here. I thought this was kind of interesting. So working from my pivot high here to my first low here. So we go from if I get it right on there. Yeah. So we actually go a tick through the 65. I mean, just barely get just a hair through it. But nonetheless, it comes back down and we go, here's our negative 23.6, and then it would appear that they pull again. The pull is here. Now we get just almost we're this front run by a couple of ticks. So good evidence that there's algo trading in here. So if that's a good pit, really all I'm doing by going through that process is, one, trying to identify how technically it's trading. Is there likely algo activity, and is this a good pivot? So when I see that action, this gives me confidence that I've got a good pivot to work from. So knowing that, again, so this, I would want to check this. So if I've got that, since that has been the pattern, a big move up and a retrace down. So here we've done it again. This is just a tick in front of the 618. So that's certainly something to be aware of. That's where you would anticipate the resistance. First bit here, it gets through it, but then we go a couple of ticks from the 618, and now we're seeing the reaction. So, just to be aware of it, it's always a good idea to go out to the longer time frame and get a sense of where you're likely to run into some resistance. So with that identified, and that is a pivot that we want to be conscious of relative to where it is on the daily. So if we go back, if we go down to an hourly and say, all right, well, what's here? Is this a potential new trend starting? So here's that pivot at the 618, and we've seen the reaction here. So I got to pull this over to here's my low that we're working from. So again, right, so you can look at this and go, well, why does any of that matter? Well, I propose to you that it matters in the context of where we are in an Elliott count and where we are relative to these fib polls and where the next reaction that we're looking for. How about I say it that way rather than the next trade? So we kind of work backwards here, and as I've shown you previously, we're reverse engineering it. So where are the deeper retracements? Because those are identifiers to me relative to an Elliott count. So I can look at this and go, well, that was deep, that was deep. Here's the big one, but here's my top. So somewhere between this low and this pivot high, where we ran into the 618. From the pull, from the swing high to the low, I'm looking for an Elliott count that makes sense. So if I look at this, the first thing I see is that likely we've got a 1, 2. It would appear to me that this is our 3. We come down for the 4, and then we go up for the 5. All right. So does that make sense? Well, here's my 1. All right. Here's my 4. We don't overlap. Is that technical? Well, let's check it. So if I get my retracement tool and I pull from my potentially what I'm trying to identify, is that a reasonable spot for a 2? Does this make sense? Well, I can definitely get a 3, 4, 5. I can get a diagonal into my 1. So if that's my 2, what am I looking for? Well, I know the high probability zones between the 38 and the 50. I get a few through it, but then we rip right up and we go just a couple of ticks off of the 618, which, by the way, so interesting. So from that 2 to the 3 high, we go a tick shy of the negative 618 from that pull. But remember, that was a tick shy from the 618 from the high to the low. Do you remember that? So that's interesting confluence. So if I go back out here and we measure that, so here's the pull. So look at this. So that's interesting confluence. So if I go to that low. Right, do you see that? So here's the 618 on that side. So now if I go back to the daily, or pardon me, to the hourly, look at that confluence. So no surprise there that you get a reaction there. That's what you call technical confluence. So interesting. And then also, you know, I'm just looking for put some structure on this. Anything here that gets my attention? Well, that's kind of interesting. So look how this the 1.5, the lower parallel, is holding it. Median line came into play here. I'd have to add the, looks like, to get the entire thing to play, I'd have to get, does the 3 get it? Even the 3 doesn't quite get it. I probably have to go to the 3.5 here. So if I go to the 3.5, even that doesn't get it. I have to go to the 4. See if I can get that. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so, you know, so here, again, so here, that is 400% from the parallel of the median line. This is 100. That's 300, 3.5, 400. So interesting. So you look at that and you go, well, how... You know, is why is that a factor? It's just the way they do it. It's the way they work the algorithms. So these first 3 pivots here are still influencing the market all the way up here. Right? So you can say, well, wait a minute. What about this? Couldn't I draw this as well? Well, sure you could. If that's my 3, here's my 4. How does that line up? You know, I mean, here's my median line, here's my lower parallel, so that's some interesting confluence right there. So if you were trading that, so that would be the 1, 2. So so I'm going to pull this one off since we've established that pivot. And let's look here. So I want to take some of that extreme off of it. So I'm not saying not to not draw these. So let's take that off, and the 3 and the 4, and we'll just go back to our 1 and 1.5. So I'm not saying once you have these established, you know, discount these or don't draw these. I'm saying we see the primary pivots within that Elliott count that it's reacting off of. So if I look here, well, this coming right to the lower parallel here in this prior resistance offering support, it makes me want to go, let's see what that was like. Well, that shouldn't be a big surprise there that's technical. So look what happens here. So here's the 50 from my swing low here to my swing, to this high here. So I've got a 1, 2, 3, looks like a 4 up to complete the 3. So if I were labeling that, I'd have this. So I'd have 1, 2, looks like 3, 4 into the 5. Let me lower the degree so it makes sense. We can go to... all right, do you see that? So within the 5th, I get yet another 5-wave structure to complete that 5th. And then I've got this massive confluence zone up here. So I've got I've got the 618, 6.5 window. I've got the negative 23 from the 50 here. I've got the negative 618 from the first pull from the 4 here. So I got just a huge cluster of technical confluence up there. And no surprise, we get the reaction, right? So from up here, so we go from up here all the way back down to here. That's the kind of reaction that you would anticipate. So let me tighten that, get that tightened up a little bit. Did I get it? There we go. All right, so upper parallel. So you got a lot of things suggesting that this is a likely pivot here, not to mention the fact that we've completed now a 5-wave structure with subdivision all the way. So from this 1, 2, 3, 4 up into our 5, I mean, just perfectly technical. So we're going to pull, let's pull all of that off, because you're like, well, okay, that's great, Sam. How does that help me now? Well, what that tells me is that I've got good pivots to work from. So with all of that identified here, so this to this, all very technical. So what are we looking for? Now I'm looking for a retracement of the entire 5-wave structure. So I go up to the high. Right? Where do we go? Here's the 50. What am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for my second, because I've got a completed 1 wave. So I'm going to lower that degree so this makes sense. So you get the idea here. So let's go to minuet here. So if I go back to a larger degree, so now remember it's waves, within waves, within waves. Okay, so if I do that, and now let's go put that in white, and we'll go to the intermediate. Okay, so now you can see that. So is this my 2? Well, it certainly qualifies because I made the 50. I got this reaction. You know, that's not the prettiest impulsive move off of that, but remember, since this is a 2, I'm looking to identify the third. It's not surprising that we might put in a diagonal. So I've got to go. Let's go to a 2 hour so we can get a little more sense of scale of where we are. So, okay, so sorry if I pull that down. Okay, so all I've potentially identified here is a 1-2. 1-2. The one wave, beautifully technical. Well, if I'm going to do a 3-4-5, and we're going to keep this going, if we're going to keep rolling here, well, so first thing, we can't, because of the lousy structure here, do we have A, B, C? So remember, we see this in crypto all the time. So potentially, we've got A, B, C there, which would mean, even though we've got the 2 here identified based off of hitting the 50, we may well have this pattern here that we see in crypto all the time. So we qualify by the A wave getting to the 50, but this we have seen a lot of, where we're getting that triangle pattern over and over again. We've seen it, I don't know how many hundreds of times in crypto. So this is what it looks like we might have here. Do you see that? So that kind of triangle pattern is unusual in the second, but we see it a lot. So we can't be definitive about this, but that appears to be what we've got. So this first shot out of it would suggest that maybe this is the one wave here. We can't be absolute. It's potentially that's a 1. So that would look like this. So if that's the low, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's change the degree again. So I'll go to green here. We'll go down. We'll go down to the subminuet. Okay, so potentially I've got my 1-2 in. Well, if that's, let's go back to the hourly and see how that's trading. Is that technical? Do we like the look of that? I mean, it's certainly not something out of the norm of what we're seeing in crypto to get that truncated C wave. So if that's a 1-2, let's check that. Well, does that play? If this is the low, if that's my C and that's my 1, well, we know a 2 can go as deep as the 786. The ideal spot between the 50 and the 618, but we get deep here, but look how this trend line supports it. So potentially we've got a new target up here for the third of the first of the larger third. Do you see that? I know it gets confusing when it would be very hard to do this without some visual. So if that's playing that way, then remember we're looking to identify the third in the largest degree here. If I've got a 1-2 there and I'm looking to get into my third, that's our money making wave. So this potentially here is the third. Now we don't know, is that the third of the third or the third of the first of the third? Well, it kind of depends on how it unfolds here, but that's the wave we want to be in, because it could potentially play as the third of the third, but that would surprise me. My guess is we're putting in the 1 wave of the third. And so why do I say that? Because if we're going to work from our statistical probability zones, the length of my 1 wave would imply to me that I got a lot of upside here if this is going to continue to follow the roadmap. So I'd measure from both, but if that plays as my 2, well, here's 100% of the length of the 1 just right here, and that would just be qualifying it as a third. The higher probability zone I got to scrunch down to show it to you. So for this third, that's what I'm looking for. That's the big target up here. And why am I using that? Simply because statistically that's the highest probability zone for a third relative to the 1. You see what I'm, so that's way, 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 way up there. So when I think about risk reward, and that's why going through all of that is worthwhile, because I can look at that and go, well, if that's the 2 wave of the third, where's this thing going? Where could it be going? So if I do a risk reward on that, and I say, I'll pull it over to the side here. Let's just say if you bought it right here, right now. So there's my target. I don't want to be below the 786. But, you know, knowing that it could keep falling. You know, all of this is potential. That could go back down again, and we're getting a more complex correction here. I think that's unlikely. So I would take it here and say, well, if we break that 786, I'm happy to take the small loser and then reevaluate. But what have I got there? That's 9.9 to 1. That's you know, that's no hesitation. Why would you not take that? Right? I mean, so the only reason not to take that is because of this. Because you're not confident in the long-term viability of this project. Even though it's been around three years, it's changed its name 3 times, and we're still only at 30% on the scale here, and we're still only at 200 million on market cap. That would be the hesitation as a technician. You know, hard not to like that. Hard not to. I mean, you could be tighter than that. You could really just get it right up on that pivot low. Now you're at 14.2 to 1. Maybe this is your first partial here, because look, so here's the 50, here's the first algo target, that negative 23 here. That could just be the 3, we'd anticipate a 4. That could just be the 1 wave of going in to get to this 5th. So we don't know how it's going to get there. It's just a potential roadmap. That's all we have here is a potential roadmap. And so what are we working from? The premise that that pivot is in. So why would you do something like that? Because now your entire analysis here is incorrect, has to be relabeled. Why would you do something like that? Now we're down to 3 to 1. No reason to do it. I want the 14 to 1 right there. That I like. 14 to 1. That's a no-brainer. So does it launch here? Well, that's a good reaction. So if I zoom in on that, and we say, okay, well, that's the kind of reaction I'd like to see if that's going to play. Well, you can just see there's three green bars in a row. That's a good reaction. We didn't make the 786. Yeah, we went deep. I've got this, you know, again, it's confluence. Do I have any confluence here? What do I got here? So I get that up to, well, actually, I'd pull it back here. I'd have to pull from here. Here's the 50. Here's the negative 23. Oh, interesting. Right? Do you think that's an algo reaction? So they sell it at the 50. They take profit at the 23.6. So, you know, algos, long, short, they don't care. It's just software. Right? So here's the sell at the 50. Here's the target. So what do we get down here? We get confluence. We get confluence between the negative 23 algo target and the negative 7, or pardon me, the 786 pulled from this low as a potential 1-2. That's the reaction you want to see. So if you're not in, you know, is it too late? Well, hell no. So one thought is you could just do that. Wait, see if you get a little retrace for an entry rather than buy into that little pump right there. Wait for a retrace, knowing that if you wait, you may not get it. Now you might be waiting to do this. Maybe you get it there. This is your stop. How deep is the retrace going to go? Well, so think again. If that's 1-2 and we're going to come out of this and we're going to put a third in, that's going to subdivide. So we're waiting for the 1-2 of that. So whether you're buying the 2 here or you're buying here, either time you're buying a 2, or whether you're buying the 2 here. 2, potentially the next 2. All right, does that make sense? Okay, guys, I'll wrap it there.